Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. This lecture we're going to look at EC2 and customer managed keys. This is for Windows users only. So in this what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and download PuTTY and PuTTY Keygen, and we're going to use PuTTY Gen to basically create our public and private key, and we're going to introduce a whole bunch of randomness around moving our mouse. Once we've done that, we're going to import our public key into EC2, and then we're going to connect to our EC2 instance using PuTTY. So you need to go over to Google. Okay, so here I am in Google. All I need to do is go ahead and type in PuTTY into Google, and that will it will send us to this website, so chiarc.greenend.org.uk. Go ahead and click in there, and you'll need to download the latest version. You probably want the 64-bit installer, so go ahead and click on that. That will then download it to your downloads directory. Once that's downloaded, go ahead and just run it. So I'm going to say show in folder, see it in my downloads directory. Just go ahead and run it. And then what we want to do is just basically hit next to everything. So next. Don't you love Windows? Install, yes. There we go. So we've gone ahead and installed it. And then it's really, really simple to use. So what we need to do is we need to go over here, go all the way down to PuTTY. And the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and generate our key. So to do that, we're going to use PuTTY Gen. So in PuTTY Gen, just open that up. In here, you can select the different types of keys to generate. So RSA, DSA, EC, DSA, etc., and you can do the number of bits in here. I'm just going to go with the standard RSA 2048, which is exactly what Amazon use when they generate their keys for EC2. So we'll go ahead and hit generate. Now you need to introduce some randomness. So they just say, please introduce some randomness by moving the mouse over the blank area. So I'm just trying to make this like really, really random. You can do this in a whole bunch of different ways in the real world, including like taking photos of clouds and the sky, etc. And that will then go ahead and generate our key. So what we need to now do is we want to save both our private key and our public key. So go ahead and just hit yes. We don't want a key phrase. So I'm going to save this into my documents directory. I'll put it in downloads, and I'll just call it my Windows key. So my Windows key. And I'm just going, and then I'm just, so I don't get confused, I'm going to say private key, or I should say PVK, because public key will be different. And I'm just going to copy that into my clipboard as well, so I don't have to type it again. Go ahead and hit save. That will save our private key, and now we want to save our public key as well. I'm going to save it into my downloads, and I'm just going to change the name to public key. And there we go, and hit save. And that has now saved both my private key and my public key. Again, I can go into my downloads and have a look. Next thing we need to do is log into AWS. Then what we want to do is just go ahead and hit import key pair. And we want to load our public key. So go ahead and choose your file and navigate to where you saved it. So I saved it in my downloads directory. And then I'm just having a little bit of trouble reading this. So I want my Windows public key. I'm going to go ahead and open that. Going to go ahead and hit import. Now we can see that public key has been saved. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and test this. So we'll go over to EC2 dashboard. We're going to go ahead and launch an instance. And essentially we're going to leave everything as default. So we're going to use the Amazon Linux AMI. We're going to do just exactly the same instance type, everything default basically. Add storage, add our tags. Not going to bother with a tag. Put it into a security group that you can access via SSH. So make sure that SSH is open to the world. So 22.0.0. Well, it doesn't have to be open to the world, but you know what I mean. Make sure the SSH port is open. Go ahead and hit launch. Now here we choose our public key. So it's my Windows public key. I'm going to go in and launch that instance. So it's now being initiated. I'm going to go over and view my instance. Don't think it'll have a public IP address just yet. So as soon as it gets a public IP address, I'm just going to wait and pause the video. Okay, so I've got a public IP address down here. I'm going to copy that into my clipboard. So go ahead and hit copy. And then what we want to do is go back over to PuTTY, the actual PuTTY directory. So down here, and I'm going to just open up normal PuTTY, so not PuTTY Gen, but just PuTTY itself. Then in here, I'm going to go ahead and paste in my public IP address. And in here, And then what we need to do is we need to go over to SSH, we need to go over to auth, and it says private key for authentication. So just browse to your private key. And so here it is, PVK. And then I'm going to go and open that, go back up here to my session, and then I'm going to go and just save this as a default setting, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit open, and that will open up to this IP address. Port 22 is open. We get this thing saying that the server's host key is not cached in the registry. Just hit yes. And of course, the one thing I forgot to do is enter my username, so EC2 hyphen and then user, and hit enter. And it's now authenticating, and there we go. We've been able to log in using a private and public key that we generated using PuTTY Keygen. The cool thing about this, of course, is that Amazon don't know our private key. They weren't involved in generating it at all. It's not to say that Amazon, will save your private key. Obviously, they've gone through a whole bunch of compliance checks, and they don't. But if you want to be like super sure that no one can access your EC2 instances, this is the way to do it. Generate the private and public keys yourself off of the cloud, load the public key into the cloud, and keep your private key separate. The way to think about public and private keys, by the way, is that a public key is like a lock. So you can have a lock, and you can have many, many different copies of the lock. And you can put the lock on your bike, you can put a lock on your house, you can put the lock into your car, anything you want to secure. And you can give that out to everyone and anyone. So that's your public key. Your private key is the thing that opens the lock, and you don't want to give that out to anyone. You want to, wear that on a chain around your neck and only have one copy. So don't give out your private key to anyone. You can give out your public key to anyone you like. It doesn't matter. They won't be able to open it without your private key. One thing I will call out, by the way, as well, if we just go back to AWS, if we were going to go into the IAM, so go down to security, identity, and compliance, if we were going to go into IAM and we wanted to, import our public key into KMS, we'd go over here to encryption keys. We go ahead and get started now. And then when we go in to create our keys, and we go to our advanced options, remember you are uploading your key material origin. You're not actually uploading a public key. So when you're using KMS, Amazon are involved in the creation of that process. It's not a public key that you upload yourself. If you want to upload your own public keys, you're not going to do that using KMS. You're going to need Cloud HSM, which we are going to do in the very next section of the course, in the VPC section. So just so everyone is crystal clear, KMS, obviously you can create key pairs, but you cannot import or export into KMS. You can only use those key pairs within Amazon. You can use them across different AWS accounts though, so you can share those key pairs. Those key pairs are used not for SSH access, so don't get that confused. You can't use a KMS key pair to SSH into EC2, but what you can use it for is to encrypt objects in S3 or to encrypt your EBS volumes, etc. Likewise, you can import a public key into the AWS key pair management in the EC2 section of the console, which is what we just did. So we imported our public key, and we then have our own copy of our private key, and we could SSH into EC2. What we can't do, though, is use that public key and private key pair to encrypt an EBS volume, at least not in the console. If we were going to encrypt an EBS volume, we would use a KMS key. And we will have a very, very quick lab on that in the very next lecture. So if you've got the time, please join me in the next lecture. Thank you.